Hello, everyone. We're so happy to have you with us here on the Stronger Marriage webinar, produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I'm Alexis Alcott, the UMC Intern Program Coordinator, and we're so excited to have you join us today as we celebrate 25 years of marriage celebrations in 2023. As a part of those celebrations and a part of the work we do around relationships and marriage strengthening, we do these webinars, and today we're so excited to be joined by Mark Ogletree. Mark was raised in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. He earned a Bachelor's of Art degree in 1987 from Brigham Young University, Master of Arts in Educational Psychology from Northern Arizona University in 1990, a Master's of Arts in Mental Health Counseling in 1994 from Northern Arizona University, and a PhD in Family and Human Development from Utah State University in May of 2000. For 20 years, Mark was involved in secondary education and has now worked for over 30 years in private practice as a marriage and family counselor. The Ogletrees live in Mesa, Arizona, McKinley, Texas, and now they reside in Provo, Utah. In 2010, Mark accepted a position at Brigham Young University as an associate professor, where he teaches courses on marriage and family life. Mark has published books and journal articles on marriage and family relations. Some of his most recent books include So You're in Love, Now What? Finding Peace in Different Times, Babysitters Are Cheaper Than Divorces, Just Married, Preparing for Your Marriage. Mark is married to the former Janie Cook, and they have 8 children and 24 grandchildren. Mark and Janie are the hosts of a weekly podcast called Preserving Families that you can listen to on iTunes, Spotify, or from their website, which is www.preservingfamilies.org. In this webinar today, you will learn how professionals can keep strength in balance and work at a high level despite the pressures they face in their professions. Whether it be familial, relational, or work-life balance, so much can weigh down on a professional's life and on their time. In this webinar, Mark will discuss ways to navigate life obstacles and make time for what you value most. If you have any questions, please ask them by entering your questions through the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. The chat will be turned off during the whole presentation, so this is really the best way to be able to interact with Mark. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of the presentation, so write down any questions you may have while he's doing it and save them for the end. If you have joined us today for the CEU credit, make sure to stay on until the very end of the presentation. The survey needed for your credit will automatically load onto the screen, and then you'll receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certification. You may also email the Utah Marriage Commission at marriagecommission@usu.edu to receive your survey on this webinar. Once the survey is completed, you will obtain an email with your CEU credit certification. We'll now turn the time over to Mark for his presentation.
Alexis, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Wonderful to be here with all of you. So thank you for coming. And you heard Alexis talk about my family. I just left a graduation party with a lot of our kids and grandkids. And so it's actually super nice to be here because it's really quiet in my office here tonight. So I thought as we begin tonight, one of the things I wanted to share is this idea of what are the most stressful jobs out there. This was U.S. News and World Report just recently, just this year. So very relevant to current data here. I just thought it was interesting that of the 20 top or most stressful jobs in our nation, that five of them are all mental health related. Everything from a marriage and family therapist to a mental health counselor and you can read the rest. I've marked them all. Once again, maybe to add to that stress a little bit, as you notice, you look up here and see that they're also not the highest paid either at the same time. And so there's no question that there's stresses that accompany working in mental health, working with families, with marriages, with individuals. And a lot of that stress isn't talked about much as we're in graduate school, going through programs and learning about what we're going to do one day. I think a lot of times we are pretty altruistic and think, hey, it's going to be so awesome helping all these people. It's going to be amazing. and we're not aware of all the challenges that can accompany the profession. And so, we're going to do this, Alexis, I think through the chat, as you were saying. But the question is, as we hear from you, is what is most stressful to you about being a mental health professional, whether that's a marriage and family therapist, a licensed professional counselor, a psychologist, a master's of social work, whether you're a student right now or you're actually in the field. What are some of the challenges in the profession? And I can even share one that I wasn't anticipating, but I never really thought much about this. But if you're doing marriage and family therapy, sometimes the only time people can come is in the evening or on Saturday mornings. And I've spent the last 20 years of my life working every Saturday morning from at least 8 to noon. That was something I never even thought of, but it just became a great time to visit with couples. But once again, that's stealing from some of our downtime a little bit there. So that was one of my thoughts. I don't know if anyone has others.
Yeah, go ahead and make sure to put it in the Q&A function, and we'll be able to see those as they kind of come up.
Yeah. And we can even talk about other challenges that I'll share. Sometimes a common one that I hear is when we're working with a really difficult person, someone that may be high maintenance or that has a really challenging problem, and maybe they want to talk off hours about that or something like that. Sometimes there's challenges that we may feel, or cases that we may feel we're not qualified for. That could be one. So Alexis, has anyone written in any yet? Because if not, I can go on and share some of the common ones.
Yeah, one of our people said, feeling I'm not competent.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's really common. That's something that I feel quite a bit. And sometimes one of the ways that I've been able to help that just for myself, just help that challenge myself, is to be able to network a little bit with other mental health professionals. And there have been times where I've worked in an office with 5 or 6 other people, and we could bounce ideas off of each other when it came to, working with some of the people we worked with. When I was in Dallas, I didn't have that. I was in my own office, kind of like I am here in Utah. And so that meant forming a network, so to speak, and reaching out to some people and say, hey, if you were seeing something with this issue, what would you do? So it is nice to know that there are people out there that are willing to help and offer their suggestions for things like that. And then, of course, there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of videos out there now that we can tap into. So it's nice to know that there are resources. But I think all of us as mental health professionals often feel that, oh my gosh, am I qualified to help with this?
Yeah, we had another person that said, maintaining confidentiality when trying to process secondary trauma ourselves.
That's a big one, right? I mean, that's a big one. What a challenge that is when you're being traumatized yourself as you're going through some kind of big case or big dilemma. And wow, once again, I think that to be able to get therapy sometimes, we'll talk about that later tonight, but the role that maybe even the responsibility that we might have to almost go through our own kind of process with a therapist to work through some of those issues and how they're affecting us. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and the last one that we've gotten said, the most challenging for them is balancing clients' expectations to be cured of chronic mental illness.
So balancing their expectations, Alexis, you said?
Yeah, to be cured completely of their chronic mental illness.
Yeah, that's a great one as well. And sometimes that one can be dealt with up front, when we're talking about goals and expectations with a client and are able to say, now, we're not telling you necessarily that you're going to be completely depression free. You may have a few symptoms, but they're going to be manageable or whatever. So maybe part of that comes from the expectations and the way that we present the treatment plan to them, letting them know that, look, you could still have a few issues here. It's not going to be, you're not going to walk out of here and be completely cured, so to speak. And in some cases that may be, but in a lot of times we want to set the expectation that, you know what, this is going to really help. This is going to give you some tools. You're going to be able to manage this a lot better than you have in the past. But you may feel some depression symptoms every so often or whatever. So, Alexis, thank you for those. Let me share some of the ones that I thought a little bit about. At least these were some of the ones that I've faced. Number one, just dealing with your own personal lives. It's not like we live in a vacuum as mental health therapists, right? And we have challenges in our own life. We have families in some cases, or friends, or other challenges that we're dealing with personally, extended family issues, whatever those health issues, whatever financial issues. Every time I'm thinking I can end that, I think of one more issue. But of course, in our own personal life, there are things to deal with. Often there are ethical dilemmas to contend with, especially if a common one in our state is that we know someone really well that wants to come and receive therapy from us, and we have to kind of navigate that. There are other ethical dilemmas as well. The heavy emotional burdens that others face. Someone talked about secondary trauma in one of their questions a minute ago, but it is something big, right? It's big sometimes to drive home and think, wow, I could not imagine being that person and having that challenge they're having right now. And then find ways to say that doesn't affect us. I think one of the most common questions I get from people who find out that I'm in the mental health field is they'll always say, how do you not take that home with you? And for a long time, I didn't think I did. But then I started noticing, right, that I was a little bit more irritable sometimes at home, or fatigued, or had my mind in another place. And I started to realize, wait, this is affecting me sometimes. I need to do something about that. Professional isolation can be an issue. We may not feel that we can talk to other people about some of the issues that we're dealing with in our practice. Separating our personal lives from our work, sometimes that's a challenge. To me, one of the most difficult of all is when there's a really difficult client, someone who's going to demand a lot of time and attention. And in some cases, we may feel that what they're experiencing may be over our heads, so to speak. And maybe we're not quite qualified to deal with something so complex. It's always nice to know in a screening call to talk to someone about what is it that you're dealing with, and then to be able to say, you know what, I am so honored and flattered that you would call me, but actually there's another person I think that can help you even more. And here's who they are. The demands of the practice, we don't talk about that in graduate school sometimes, with mounds of paperwork, intake forms, insurance forms to fill out. Sometimes we have large caseloads. I know right now, and I think all of you can attest to this, but to get into therapy somewhere, to get into a practice, to work on issues, sometimes can be a really, really long wait for people. Right now, we're flooded. We've been inundated with people who want extra help. And sometimes it's hard to fit those people in unless you're willing to work longer hours to do things like that. We talk about compassion fatigue. There's a lot of research about compassion fatigue. This reminds me of a chiropractor that I once visited, who his wife told me later, because I saw them in marriage counseling, but she said that when he got home every day, he didn't want to touch anyone. He didn't want to touch anyone in their family. He didn't want to give his wife a hug. He didn't want to touch any of their children. And he said, yeah, it's because I touch people all day. Well, think about how that would apply in mental health, right? When it comes to not so much touching, but talking and listening to people and being in the presence of people and showing that compassion. And then you just run out of gas at some point. You run out of steam. Number 10, balancing family and work. That can always be a challenge. Number 11, those evening and weekend hours sometimes that we are, have to deal with. I remember once again thinking how cool it would be to be in mental health, because eventually if I was in private practice, I could set my own hours But I think then you get into the trap of, but wait, I need to see all these people so I can make money and pay the bills and pay the overhead. And next thing you know, you're working every evening and on weekends anyway. Often we ask ourselves, how effective are we? Am I really any good at this? Am I really helping this person? Because I don't know if I see it. There's not enough time, number 13, to do all that we should or that we feel like we should in the profession. Or in other words, a lot of us would like to be getting better and improving and learning new things and trying new techniques. And we may feel that with our caseload, we're not able to ever even address that stuff. How to know what the best intervention is to use with a client. By the way, you can tell these are not in any order at all. This is a complete brainstorm here on my part. Feeling that we're not successful, I think that's one of the hardest things there is for a mental health professional, is to feel like, wow, I don't think I'm helping this person the way that I should. And that can weigh on us. That could be stressful. We want them to feel like that they're progressing and that they're growing and they're making progress. Then we get into number 16, people who aren't really motivated, and I know sometimes we have those clients where we're like, wait, why are you here? Or what I often want to say to people, but never do, but I want to say, why am I more worried about your problem than you are? I feel like I'm a little bit more worried about this. So I want to share with you an experience I had. Not that this is an advertisement for Trader Joe's at all. I actually went on Google Images the other day and I found this picture, but this was my first private practice in McKinney, Texas. It was when I decided to go on my own for the first time. And this was a big shopping area. And this was just one of the, in fact, when I was there, there was a Baskin Robbins ice cream right below it. But anyway, not sure what happened to that, but my offices were right up here. And what I did is I transitioned from a job in secondary education, even some university teaching, and decided I would be a therapist full time. And then because of the area that I was in was rather new, and I was one of the kind of the first therapists in the area, and a lot of people came to know us just because we had children at the high school that did things and people were aware of them, and the practice filled up really fast. And before I knew it, I was seeing 45 clients a week. I was working every day of the week, sometimes later into the evening, and every Saturday, just didn't have any time off. I chose not to hire a secretary, which looking back, or an office assistant of some kind, which looking back was a really bad idea on my part because that could have really helped. But I just didn't want to pay out the money for anyone yet until we grew it a little bit more. I was able to get on several insurance panels, which meant people were contacting me all day long wanting to get in and get appointments. But now I had to sit and fill out, in those days, insurance forms, and then only to find out how difficult that was. And sometimes, not sometimes, it felt like about half the time those insurance forms would come back and say, oh, you forgot to dot this I or cross this T, and we need you to submit it again and try again next month or whatever. Anyway, it was super, super stressful. And here I was treating people with anxiety and panic and post-trauma, and I started to have that myself. And I remember one day I just called my wife from this very office where you see this arrow. I was on a Saturday morning, and I said, something's wrong with me. I don't know what's going on, but something's wrong. And there was a neighbor of ours who was a nurse. We called her and I just kind of explained some symptoms, and she said, go check your blood pressure. And so we had that done. And I didn't even know in those days what those numbers meant with blood pressure. I just knew that when I called her, she said, you should go to the hospital like immediately. And we did. And of course they run all the tests, can't find anything wrong. The blood pressure was a little high, but anyway, through a series of going to different doctors, trying to find out what was wrong with me, I literally felt like I was going to die. My wife one day came to pick me up for lunch, and she was opening a workbook that I use with clients who had anxiety. And she went through the checklists, and she said, you have every single symptom in this book. And I was like, no, there's no way I can have anxiety. I treat people with anxiety, but sure enough, I was having my own anxiety. My life was so out of balance. I'd become so stressed out that I wasn't doing myself or anyone I was seeing any favors at all. And so I had to get back on track myself and regroup and figure out how I was going to take on this business and balance things and not lose my family or myself in the process. So let me share some data with you for a few minutes. This is one study. About 40% of mental health professionals report some kind of emotional exhaustion. Other studies report burnout rates that can range from 21 to 67%. I'm kind of laughing at that stat. I know that's a wide range there. It's like saying from 0 to 100%. But anyway, in one study, 46% of licensed professional counselors reported being depressed. It's almost half. And 70% of psychotherapists said their job was really stressful. Another study, 61% of psychologists reported they had suffered at least one episode of clinical depression. About 30% disclosed they had felt suicidal at times. And then 4% of mental health professionals, of these psychologists anyway, had acknowledged that they had made a suicide attempt. Another study of 1,000 mental health professionals, as you can see, 62% self-identified in that measure as being depressed. So, wow, we have a lot of stress on us. Here's another study. 62% of the psychologists in this study admitted to working when they felt too stressed out to be effective. And of those same psychologists, 85% believed that it was unethical to practice under those conditions, but that yet they were doing it. 44% of psychotherapists in this study reported that they dealt with insomnia. Mahoney, another great researcher, 43% of psychotherapists experienced emotional exhaustion and irritability just in the last year. 41% of these psychologists or mental health professionals, as you can see, reported insufficient sleep, problems with marriages and other intimate type relationships, 38%, chronic fatigue, 33%, anxiety, 35%, depression, 34%. So I'm going to share with you my thought here. I'm going back to Dr. Stephen R. Covey and his the 7 habits of highly effective people, talking about that last habit, the habit number 7, of sharpening the saw, of taking the time to sharpening, backing away from the tree, and let's get our saw sharp so that we can be effective. I love his quote. I've never seen this one before until recently, but have you ever been too busy driving to stop for gas? And I think that's a great way to say that for a lot of mental health professionals, is that we're just too busy. We don't even have time to stop for gas. So here's some questions for all of us. When was the last time that you took a vacation? How are we eating? Are we getting pleasure out of the work that we do? Are we enjoying it as much as we thought we were going to? Are we able to laugh much? And do we have some personal time on a regular basis? Now, one of the things I want to share right here, especially as I'm looking at, are you getting pleasure out of the work that you do? I completely believe that life really boils down to what we choose to focus on. And you know what? We can choose to focus on the negative. We can choose to focus on the challenges and all the problems, or we can choose to focus. For example, I can choose in my own practice here in Orem, Utah, I can choose to focus on some of the difficult cases that I have, or I can focus on how much I love working with some of the people I work with and my schedule that I like and the benefits that this profession brings to my marriage and my family. So we're going to use the oxygen mask, that it doesn't do us much good to strap that oxygen mask on the airplane, on everyone else's head while we're turning purple. We've got to put it on ourselves first, as we know, before we'll be effective to other people. And so some of the things on my list, I came up with 30. And by the way, I'm not saying that this list is incredible or amazing or all comprehensive at all. It's just, these are some things I believe they're things I've read about in other places, and I think that they can be beneficial And exercise is certainly one of them for sure. I know that that's been a great help to me. In fact, at that time in my life that I was relating to you a little while ago, back in the suburbs of Dallas and starting my own practice for the first time, one of the things I quit doing was I quit exercising because I thought I was too busy. And that proved to be just ridiculous, right? Number 2 is to eat right. We understand that. 3, get enough sleep. Find ways to relax. In fact, do we ever use some of the techniques that we're teaching other people to use when it comes to relaxation? I'm sitting there doing some of these techniques with people in my office and thinking, why don't I do this myself more? Having good family time and friend time with some legitimate recreation and rejuvenation. Time with a significant other, which could mean retreats, date nights, whatever that means for you and your situation. How about number 7, finding some kind of hobby, finding something that you can love and be passionate about. Here we have a person on a mountain bike, but there's all kinds of hobbies that we can engage in. How about going out to lunch with another mental health professional and just learning about what they do, learning about their practice and some of the things that they're implementing in their practice and some of the things that they're focused on. Engaging in continuing education. One of my favorite parts of this is why not learn about things that we are passionate about and learn as much as we can about those things. For me personally, one of the things that I love is I'm always looking forward to something that's coming up. We try to plan trips, vacations, entertainment. And for me, it's like, okay, this is the next couple months are going to be pretty crazy, but I'm going to be golfing in St. George in 2 months, or we're going on this retreat. Maybe we're going on a cruise or to Mexico, but just things to look forward to. Number 11 has become more of a favorite of mine, taking advantage of professional conferences. I'm learning that, okay, the content of the conference is awesome. I certainly want to learn and be at the right place with the right content. But I'm also becoming very selective in where those conferences are, because if there's a beach nearby, that's an added plus, right? Engaging with other mental health professionals, forming some kind of network where we can share ideas, occasionally eat together and just talk about what we're doing in our practices. Receiving therapy yourself. Only 26% of therapists receive therapy, for their own issues. Yet like 80% in some studies have said, that is such a great idea, I should totally do that. But only 26% actually do. Having some kind of spiritual or religious activities to become grounded. Number 15, managing our workload. Once again, this is, I have students where I teach at BYU all the time that want to come and talk to me about the profession. And I can sell them on it pretty easy because I'm talking to them about all these things that one day I hope to do and ended up bypassing. But things like you could work every other day. Things like you could work really intensely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and kind of be off Thursday and Friday, or those could be half days. We could break the day up. One of the things I learned in that practice in Dallas when I was doing this full time all day long is I would work from about 8 to noon. That would be my first 4 appointments of the day. And then from noon to 3, I was off every day. And from noon to 3, I'd go eat somewhere with my wife or at home. I would go exercise, go play racquetball with a friend, go eat lunch with someone, whatever. But that was a good little siesta, so to speak, that time of day for me. And then I'd go back and I'd be back from 3 until 7. But that wasn't bad. If I could do it all over again, I would definitely not work on Fridays. And I think Thursday would be about half of a day. Don't accept clients outside of your realm of expertise. Sometimes we just take on too many. I know that was a temptation for me in Dallas, as almost anyone who would call, I would try to fit them in if I could, because I was trying to stay afloat financially. I was, self-employed now, and I also had overhead. And so someone had to pay the rent, someone had to pay the phone bill and all that stuff. And then you can get sucked into that. And so be careful and limit yourself there. Number 17, identify what some of your own favorite coping strategies are. Is that getting a massage? Is it sitting in a hot tub? Is it going on a trip? Is it reading a book? Whatever that is for you. Going off the grid for a while and just unplugging for a day is sometimes a great thing for a therapist to do. Getting out in nature, finding ways to laugh often. Guys, I'm going to confess, every morning and every night, I start my day and I end my day with at least a 5-minute clip from a comedian on YouTube somewhere. Often it's dry bar comedy. Often it's one of my favorites, Tim Hawkins or Jim Gaffigan or someone like that. Get into a routine and stick with it. Therapists do really well when they have routines. Journaling and writing can be a good downtime for us. Using music in a great way to be healing. Learning to say no. Guys, this is where I've got so sucked into this, but someone calls and like we're doing tonight in a way, but they need a speaker. They need someone to speak on marriage or family or depression or anxiety or on stress, some mental health issue. And we find ourselves saying yes all the time. And sometimes we probably just need to say no. Now, 25 is my bonus, but I call it just get a massage chair. You can do it. You can fill in 25, whatever your thing is. But a couple of years ago, my wife and I made the investment of getting a massage chair. And at the end of every day, and you know how long that lasted, for about a month, we would sit in that chair. And then we forgot about it for about 5 or 6 months. But I'm back to it now and try at least a couple of times a week to just sit in that chair, put on my James Taylor music, and just kick back and relax for a while. It's a great way to kind of end the day. Another thought is to declutter your life and get organized. We have so much chaos coming at us as therapists that to have our own life in order can be really helpful. I know that's been really helpful for me to have my life organized, to try something new, even if that's a new food, a new adventure, to take a nap. Why not? We tell our clients to do it. Why not? How about this one? Engaging in physical labor where we can build something, put something together, yard work. I came to know years ago that I started to learn why I loved yard work so much. And it was because yard work was one of the only things I engaged in that I could actually see the result immediately after doing it. Or in other words, at the university and teaching students, maybe at the end of the semester, out of 300 students, 5 or 6 will come up and say, "Hey, thanks. That was great. Really enjoyed the class." And in mental health, in a therapy session, sometimes we wonder, are we making any progress at all? And it may take a while to see that. But to go out and engage in some kind of physical labor for me was always awesome, to be able to say, "Hey, my yard looks awesome today," right? Treat yourself to something you enjoy, whatever that is. This book by Ashley Davis Bush, I think is wonderful. Simple self-care for therapists, restorative practices to weave through your workday. But taking care of yourselves is one of the kindest things you can do for others, she said. When your cup runneth over, you'll have more to share. Another quote from that book, that being a therapist is a bit like being a singer. The instrument is ourselves. We are responsible for the sound, the tenor, the timbre, the vibrato, and the tone. And because of that, we need to keep our instrument, our presence, well cared for. And man, is that the truth. We really do need to be our best as we deal with people. We can't walk into a counseling session or a therapy session fatigued or with our mind on something else, or actually thinking, you know what, I should be sitting on the couch today and you should be the therapist because I'm really jacked up, right? We want to be our best selves, healthy in every way that we can be. And I love these quotes from different authors here. The care, therefore, of every man's soul belongs unto himself. Our self-care, our self-compassion rests upon us. We're going to care more about that than anyone else. And so we have to fight for that time to do it. Rest and self-care are so important, Eleanor Brown said. When you take the time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. In other words, if our bucket is empty, we're not going to be effective at all, and we know that. We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong, but the amount of work is the same. Carlos Castaneda. Wow. What an incredible statement. We make ourselves miserable or strong, but the amount of work is the same. And so the message this evening is one of the greatest ways that we can be effective is to take the very medicine that we're giving to others, right? Is to be able to find ways to manage our lives a little bit better, to take care of ourselves, to sharpen our saws so that we can be the best that we can be for those who we're working with to help. And that is the message that I share with you this evening, and I'm ready for any questions now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. That was awesome.
Yeah, you bet.
So yeah, just everybody, please, if you had any questions during this presentation or things that came up for you or things you noticed, please enter them into that Q&A function down here at the bottom. We do have somebody that asks, what relaxation techniques do you use in your everyday life?
That's awesome. That's a great question. For me, one of the things I learned when I was having my own anxiety is I really needed to exercise. I needed to ramp up the exercise. And so I started to do that a little bit more in terms of running and playing racquetball and some good cardio for me. But that massage chair is one of my favorites, not going to lie. And there are some great breathing exercises. And Alexa, I don't mind standing up and demonstrating a couple of those. Tell me how weird that would be.
No, go for it.
The reason why is because it's hard to explain, but I can do it if I stand up. And so one of them is the Superman breath, where your fists are back here, kind of in your kidney area, chest expanded, and you're just taking those deep breaths while you have on that awesome ocean wave music in the background, right? And so there's one like that. The other one that I really love is when you go up on your toes and you reach for the ceiling while you're inhaling. So, and then you let it out as you come down, go back down on your heels flat. I do that in my office all the time with people. I don't have a name for it, but it's one of my favorite ones. And when I do that for about 3 or 4 minutes, I really feel much more relaxed. And so those are probably two of my favorites. I've done yoga before a little bit. That's good. Stretching is good. One of my favorite really is to listen to just those beat sounds and just lay in the beanbag chair and just kind of kick back for a little while.
I love that. What a good way to be able to just like recenter and ground yourself.
Yeah.
So another person asked, how did you find time to make your routine? Sounds like they're said that they're kind of struggling to be able to make their own routine in their everyday life just because they feel like they don't have the time to do so.
That's a great question. I think a lot of us feel that way. I think that we feel that there's not a lot of time. And so part of it was carving that time out of the schedule a little bit. Like I kind of mentioned, I would work, when I was doing this full time, I would carve 3 hours out of the middle of the day, to just find a little bit of time. But the other one that I've had to learn, and this has been hard because I think I wake up pretty early, but I'm learning that to get everything done that I need to, I'm going to have to wake up a little bit earlier. And so instead of waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes it's 5. Now I know that may sound horrible to some, but that's one of the ways I found. In fact, it's been quite freeing to feel like, hey, wait a minute, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I've already answered every email. I've already read and studied if those are some of the things people like to do. I've read this chapter of a book. I've exercised. I kind of feel like I'm ahead of the day. A lot of us, I think, feel like by starting off a little bit later that we never quite catch up, as the day goes. We start off behind because there's so many emails and text messages and other things to deal with. And so one of the ways to get ahead of that is maybe to wake up a little bit earlier. And I know that means going to bed a little bit earlier, but that's how if they're asking how that's worked for me, that's been about the only way I've been able to figure that out.
That's awesome. I mean, for me, waking up at 5 sounds pretty terrible.
It is, Alexis.
but definitely changing his
You sleep
life.
really well. By about 9 o'clock at night, you just go right out, so.
So we have the next person that says, what do you usually focus on while you're trying to ground yourself?
That's going to be different for a lot of us. But for me, obviously there's a spiritual component, for some. And I would put myself in that category. That helps me a lot. But another thing that has been helpful to me is to focus on the good. To be able to, I think one of the greatest things that we can do as therapists is to give people hope. You want people to come into your office and leave and feel like, oh my gosh, for the first time in my life, I think I feel like there's a chance, right? There's a chance that I could get through this challenge or whatever. And so for me, it's the focus on faith and hope and optimism and positivity. And once again, back to that focus theory of trying to focus on things that are good, and seeing the good. We live in a world today, as everyone knows, that it's just so easy to see all the horrible and all the bad. I think it's a gift now to be able to see some of the good things and to be able to convey that hope and that optimism to other people. But for me, that comes from reading positive things, from being around positive people, and from even kind of creating some of that positivity myself by focusing on the good things,
Perfect. I love that. We have another person that asks, what strategies do you have to manage expectations with documentation and paperwork? How do you feel? How do you avoid feeling like you're drowning in it?
That's another, boy, that's a tough one, right? And so once again, for me, it has been to have like half a day, let's say, where you can just, and I know everyone can't do this, but to have a half a day where you're catching up on some paperwork, right? And just doing some administration as you're kind of running a business here. And sometimes, once again, it takes kind of waking up a little bit early. It takes sometimes having a really good office assistant that you may have to hire that can just do that part for you, so you just don't have to worry about it, having some kind of assistant in your life. That's how it's worked for me. And I'm not saying that's the only answer, but those are some that I've experienced. I'm laughing because I still don't think I do that well, It's still a challenge.
We have another question that says, what would you suggest to new clinicians as they are trying to find their population, while at the same time learning to say no or turning away people to work with? Sometimes it feels like saying yes to everyone is the only way to learn who you would like to work with, but it's also overwhelming.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And once again, when I have students come in and talk to me about wanting to be in the field of mental health, and they say, okay, is there anything I could be doing right now to get ready for that as an undergraduate student? And one of the things I tell them to do is to read, to start reading and to read a variety of things and start to form your belief and your philosophy and your niche. What is it that you're going to really like to do? What is it that you're passionate about? So that's number one. And then number two, I completely agree with what whoever asked the question is saying here. I really do believe that you have to see a wide variety of people at first as a brand new clinician to kind of figure out what you really want to do. I know when I first started in Mesa, Arizona, back in the early 1990s, I think they probably did this on purpose, but at the private practice where I worked, I think they gave me the cases that no one else wanted, or that were difficult. And so, and I learned really fast that there were some things I just didn't like to deal with. It just wasn't my area. It wasn't really my area of interest. And when I got to Dallas, I kind of worked with a partner. And what he was really good at is like what I would call very severe mental health challenges, like schizophrenia and maybe bipolar and some things like that, where that just was not my thing. But I love marriage and family stuff. I love working with people with anxiety since I was coming out of my own anxiety and depression. And so we would send those cases to each other, right, as we came across them. But I wouldn't have known that unless I had opened up the door and saw a little bit of everything at first. And I'll tell everyone a funny story if I could just take an extra minute on that question. But when I first started in Texas, and it was a part-time thing at first, I saw people at my house. You know, I had an office in my home, and I saw people in my home, which was a little bit of a challenge. But I remember a guy drove up into our driveway, and he had a severe mental illness. And I asked him a little bit more about that, and just kind of keep in mind that in my yard that day were 2 or 3 of my little children playing with each other and with some neighbors. And this guy told me, he said, when I see little kids like that, I want to destroy something. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, when I see innocence, I want to destroy it. And I remember thinking, you know what, number one, this is our last session. We won't be doing this one again. I'm not having you come to my house with children if you really feel that way. But number two, it was a realization that this is not my area. This is not the area that I want to spend my time in. I would not have known that, though, had I closed the door, right? I had to experience some of those have a variety of those experiences so that I could learn A, what my niche was, and B, what I was passionate about, what I loved, and C, what I was pretty good at. And I do think you're right. I think you have to open that door, let those people in, and experience a little bit of everything at first so that we can start to hone in on what we love.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that experience. This other person is also a new clinician, and they're saying that they're kind of struggling not therapizing people outside of the actual room. So they're wondering what boundaries you might have set with your spouse and your children to be able to have that distance in work and life.
I want to understand that question better. When they say therapize, are they talking about how sometimes as a therapist we're sizing people up? Is there a way to get clarification on, or are they just talking about in general how to turn the button off when you're in different settings? Let's see if we can
see what they say. Yeah. Oh, it just came in. Yeah. So they said that the second one is kind of how they're feeling, just like not being able to bring therapy work, and how like different questions and different things like that, strategies that you may use as a therapist, that make it so that a person feels like you are acting like you're a therapist to them.
That's a great question, and I love it. And I'm not going to profess that I'm the best at this, but there's a couple of approaches that I want to share. Number one, don't think that that's always a bad thing. You know, that actually could be a really good thing. There were so many times I would come home when our children were younger and at home with us, where I would share an experience with them. Now, once again, you're no confidentiality being breached at all, other than, wow, I saw a person today that had this challenge. Guys, make sure that you always, whatever, let's take care of our mental health. Let's take care of our family. And so I always kind of felt in some ways that all the things I was learning as I was reading books, going to conferences, that could benefit my family first, And so I actually wanted that to be part of it in a lot of ways. And it has come in handy. In our home, we have 7 daughters. We have 1 son and 7 daughters, but as our children have gone through the process of finding someone to marry, I'm so glad that I had this mental health experience, because there were some times where we saw some red flags. I'm not sure I would have been really in tune to that, so to speak, had I not had the training that I had. So that's kind of one side. Now on the other side of it, where we really need to, change gears and not be a therapist all night long, Everyone is different because we all have a different personality. So the way that we're going to do that is different for all of us. I actually knew a friend, and I just told you about him a minute ago, the one that liked to take all those hard cases on. He would actually come home every night, walk in the door, and take a shower first thing. And in some ways that was symbolic, I guess, but he would tell me that sometimes he felt so filthy that he felt like he needed to take a shower. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but that was him. He was dealing with a lot of hard things. Some people have a routine of saying something to themselves as they're driving home in their car, listening to music or whatever, finding some way to shift the gears and to realize, okay, I'm in a different role now and I'm peeling this off. I mean, it's actually a very deliberate, calculated type of step that you're taking, to try to really shift the gears and to not be a therapist. So on one hand, I'm saying, hey, way to go. This is awesome. You're going to view the world through that lens as a therapist for the rest of your life. But number two, so you embrace it. But number two, let's find a way to peel that off a little bit so you can be home and just relax and be with the people that you love the most and be available to them. And how you figure that out is going to depend on you. Some people want to go for a run or take a walk or just eat or just have 15 minutes to themselves. But whatever process you need to go through to peel that away, so to speak, and walk in as a new person, figure out what that is and do it.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing. Another person is wondering, how do you handle it emotionally when you have a really tough client, like the guy who had schizophrenia, whether that be self-harm, eating disorders, etc.? How do you take that and provide space for yourself outside of the office?
I think, first of all, you have to be in that area, in that space where you have to ask yourself, do I like this? Am I enjoying this? Is this the kind of therapy that I want to be involved in? Because if you're like, yeah, I really do. I want to help that population. Then, yeah, we're going to have to find ways to turn off the switch, right? If you're like, you know what, this is really like, I'm not recovering from this. This is affecting my whole night. I'm really worried that I have a client that's going to commit suicide. And so we almost have to learn how to compartmentalize and do everything, knowing that we've done everything that we can. But one of my favorite expressions of a therapist that I really admire, he always asks those he works with when they tell him a serious problem, is he'll say, so what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do? Wow, that is a big problem. What are you going to do? Wow. He has this great ability to put these things back on them, and I'm here to counsel with you. We're going to talk about this together, but what are you going to do? And so there's an approach there. The other approach would be to take every measure possible. If we feel that maybe someone's unsafe to themselves or others, we are responsible, as you all know, to take every measure possible to try to protect people, to try to protect the person from themselves, to try to protect others. If that means we need to make some phone calls, call the police, whoever we need to. I'm talking about their super severe, type of situations where we just want to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row, so to speak. And it's never a bad thing to have a mentor where you're working that you could call and say, hey, this is going on. Am I handling this the right way? And to have someone else say, you're doing it exactly right. That's exactly what you need to do. And that often can give us some peace of mind. So I hope, Alexis, I was okay on that one. I know it's bouncing everywhere, but there's some ideas for that.
That's perfect. I just wanted to ask, as we're kind of rounding out this webinar, if there's any resources or any other things that you want to share with your audience today, whether that be more about your books or your social media accounts or whatever. Now's your time to go ahead and plug yourself.
No, I don't. I probably won't plug myself for anything, because my area of research and writing is probably a little bit different than our topic tonight. I'm kind of in the niche of some marriage and family things. But what I will tell you is, I mean, sure, listen to our podcast, Preserving Families, on iTunes. But I think this book, and I'll share it with you one more time, Ashley Davis Bush, Simple Self-Care for Therapists, Restorative Practices to Weave Through Your Workday. I think that's a good read for therapists, to learn how to have that balance and to get our lives in the right spot, to enjoy what we're doing a little bit more, to realize what our strengths are, but also to know where our weak spots are as well. But to take the time to recharge our batteries and to sharpen our saw so that we can be awesome for people.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. We've really appreciated having you on tonight. And thanks everybody else for participating and sharing your different views and thoughts on mental health and your amazing role in it. I was telling Mark just about how excited I was to learn about this. Being in the marriage and family field, I don't always get the opportunity to get into the mental health field too much, even though it's something I'm really interested in. So it was amazing to learn from you and to be able to learn from you, the audience, as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Once again, thanks. So once again, if you have attended this webinar for a CEU credit, make sure to stay on while the webinar ends for that survey. So come on just right when we end the survey and this different webinar. And then that certificate will be sent to the email that you fill out on that survey. Or you can also email us at marriagecommission@usu.edu to be able to fill out that survey and to get the certification subsequently. Have a great night, everyone. And thanks once again, Mark.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Thanks, everyone. Good to be with you.
Have a great night.